comments. Now, following that story, once again, we turn to Elizabeth Kemgisa, who is the advocacy manager, FIDA Uganda, to pick her thoughts. She was in that story on a net story that compelled the Uganda Association of Women Lawyers, which she works for, to petition the High Court seeking orders to recognize and protect cohabitation relationships. A very good evening, Elizabeth, and thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having us today.
Well, you were very vocal in that story about Annette's situation, and from where you sit, let's start with you. What do you make of the story once again?
One of the things we need to recognize is that from where I sit, Annette's story is my mother's story, is another woman's story, is so many women's stories in Uganda right now, that many women are in relationships or unions that they may consider marriages but are not actually marriages. That so many times on a daily we receive cases in FIDA where a woman comes and tells you, my husband. They're speaking about a person that they've been living with without legally being married to, but they believe they're their husband or their spouse because they've been with them for a certain period of time or because they have kids together. And for me, for me and everyone at FIDA right now is a very painful place, because we know that more than 70% of women in Uganda right now are living in cohabiting unions, which usually explaining plainly is that you're living as a girlfriend and a boyfriend. And that means that I will wake up one day and leave without you asking me a question about where I will go. And that has an economic implication on many of the women in this country, because we know many of the times in these unions, women have many contributions that they make to these unions. There is the unpaid care work that is a conversation that Ugandans need to have right now. There are also other non-monetary contributions to these unions that many Ugandans do not want to recognize because of how socially we've been brought up. A woman should take care of the children. A woman should pick kids from school. A woman should make sure that kids are well and healthy and are clothed, and that a man has clothes to wear the next day to go to work. All those are unpaid. But also many times women contribute to, even in monetary value, but may not be able to prove because, well, they may not be able to keep receipts, or they bring money together with their male partners to build homes or to bring up homes. And for us, that's a bad place to be for many women in Uganda. So today, when we instituted this suit, we are hoping that the court can recognize that women in cohabiting relationships, actually many women and men in cohabiting relationships, have rights, have certain benefits that they ought to get at the end of that relationship, either at the end of the relationship through a separation or at the death of one of the partners. Yeah.
Well, we must be talking about issues that affect most of the Ugandan population, I believe. And if you're listening to this conversation, do go to our social media platforms and send in your thoughts. And in fact, we do bring in a question that, you know, has been in my mind. Ideally, for example, what should we be doing? You know, since you said 70%, what should we do and not do with these people?
One of the things that...
Like from where you said, I know she approached FIDA, but I mean, what for the younger people or the older generation that are probably in that situation, what should they say, okay, from today I'm not going to do to avoid a similar situation?
If I responded to that question from my perspective, it would be coming from a very privileged point of view.
Yes.
So there is not a one do this and don't do this, because many women are in these situations because, one, they are not aware that the situations will lead to a place like where our client is right now, that they may be struggling to be able to prove that I actually contributed to the building of this house, and therefore I should be able to benefit at the end of this union that is not recognized currently in Uganda, right? But then secondly also, if I answer that question that many young people out there do A or do B to be able to protect yourselves, then I'm taking away from the very many realities of women in Uganda, where we see that many women do not get to choose to either be in cohabiting relationships or in marriages that are recognized in this country.
They just find themselves there.
They find themselves there for different reasons.
Yeah.
She gets pregnant and then the parents are thinking, please go live with this man, let them become your partner. And then from one child to another and then to another. When you have your second child, you're thinking about building a house, you're thinking about paying school fees, and you're not thinking about running to your cow, running to your RSB, running to church to have this wedding or to have this marriage recognized by law. And that for us is the place where we are coming from, Sandra, today, to say that there are so many women that are putting their rights and protections at the center, at the front line, to be able to see that families are able to operate and run properly in quote unquote. And at the end of the day, because of that sacrifice that they make, then at the end of the day, they are suffering the negative impacts of that. Not many women choose to be in this kind of relationships, but also you may be able to see, because you're in this space, the media space, then many women are not able to choose to say, please, dear husband or dear partner that is a man, marry me today. They may not choose to do that. You do not get to choose, because you don't want to come off as desperate. And we know this is real for many Ugandan women right now, especially young women. For older women, it's become a norm. We have 5 children. What more are we looking for? And that's what FIDA is coming up to do, to say that there are so many young women, there are so many older women right now in these kinds of unions. How do we protect their contributions to these unions?
Now, speaking about how to protect their contributions, speak to us about the law and how it looks like. In case it comes into effect, how does it look like?
Okay, one of the things, real quick, I'll say that why we thought that this case was important to institute today was because the law as it is currently offers certain benefits and protections to women that are in marriages that are recognized under the law, right? And that is a discrimination on economic status, on sex, and on marital status, which is not acceptable by our constitution, right? The fact that because I am not legally married to man A, I do not get to enjoy a certain benefit, then is discrimination by virtue. Like, we do not get to argue about that, right? So what we are looking at right now is trying to evoke the court to think about, what does it look like? Do we want to have the South African view of where we say after a certain kind of number of years, then we'll recognize that as a certain kind of union that can be recognized under the law? Do we look at the number of children that we have? All we are looking at is that we want the court to look into these unions that are not usually recognized under the law.
But again, let me just ask you, the Court of Appeal recently made a landmark decision on marriage and divorce, saying that partners do not automatically, get to share, share in their matrimonial property. Would you also want the same to apply to these that are cohabiting as well?
Of course not. Of course not. That case had its positives and negatives. One of the positives that we saw with it as FIDA Uganda, I think, was the fact that it spoke of the unpaid, the care work that is given in the home. The only problem that we saw with it was the fact that they were talking about a market value for the care work that is given at home. We know the market value of care work. How much do you pay your domestic worker, you that is watching the news today? So if you're saying that you're going to pay a woman for the 27 years, like our client, that they've been with their partner, at the value of that you pay a domestic worker, then where will you leave this woman and their contribution to that? Then secondly, we do not want to have a situation where women's unpaid care work and the other non-monetary value that they give in a home is not recognized. And that's one of the things that we saw with this case. But also, this is a woman who got married to this person at 19. And this case is getting decided when she's about 50 plus and is only getting 20%. I think that's a cheat. Ultimately, you could tell it's a cheat. But also, we also see that many women are usually unable to quantify, because of many reasons that we may not be able to finish in the 3 minutes or 5 minutes that we have right now. They may not be able to quantify how they've been able to contribute to a home because they're not giving money. And that means that many of us need to move away from the thinking of a capitalistic, because we think in terms of money, how much money I bring to the table. We forget that because I'm ironing clothes for you, because I'm making sure that I'm cooking for you, and you're able to leave the home as early as you can, you're able as a man to make money and bring home. Those are some of the things we're looking at.
Let us keep this conversation on our social media platforms now. The thoughts of Elizabeth. And now we do turn to you once again. We remind you of a poll question tonight. We did ask that you share with us your thoughts on the call by FIDA for a law that recognizes and also protects cohabitation relationships. Now, there's something she mentioned, the fact that 70% of the Ghanaian population is actually in that situation. So what are your thoughts? Are you in that? And what would you rather we do? Do send us your comments on our social media platforms, and we'll be back to sample those thoughts. We'll take a short break now, and still to come, we'll be here.